The Rainbow Tower. Written by Alex Tymms. Illustrated by R H Stewart. Episode 26. Red. Jed's heart hammered as the helmet came lower and lower. He felt the tips of the needles grazing his scalp as the noise from his heart filled his ears. And he realised it wasn't just his heart he was hearing. The steady rhythm matching his own was coming from around him, just like it had in the heart room. The first needle pierced his skin, and Jed cried out at the shooting pain in his skull. At that very moment, the wall to his right, where he'd seen the mucus, exploded. Plaster and blockwork chunks were thrown across the room. The aide and the enforcers were blown off their feet, while Jed's chair flew sideways. Then the liquid hit him. Screaming filled his ears as the orange executive threw up his hands to the skin that boiled on his face. Still the liquid came pouring out the rent in the wall. Beside him, the enforcers tried to rise to their feet, but small white strands were forming all over them, rooting them where they were. Jed was amazed. The building had come to his rescue. Jed wrenched off the helmet, wincing as he pulled out the needle and threw it aside. He staggered upright, the deluge still pouring over him. At the far end of the table, he could just make out Swenson, also on his feet and keeping well away from the liquid. The chief executive stared in revulsion at his slowly dissolving aide, who was trying to pull himself up using the table. Behind Jed, one of the enforcers managed to crack open his covering strands, but another burst of fluid doused the guard and he began to stick fast again. Aidan had hauled himself upright, his skin almost gone, and staggered several steps towards Swenson. The chief executive matched him by retreating, a look of horror on his face. The executive tried to say something, then collapsed motionless on the floor. Jed made for Swenson. He was going to force him to see sense, and this was his best chance. "Guards! Guards!" Swenson yelled before Jed could reach him, and more enforcers crashed through the doors behind the chief executive. Jed could see this was a lost cause. He snatched up his phone from the table and sprinted back down the boardroom to where the two enforcers stood entombed in white crystals. He sprinted past them and crashed out the doors. "After him!" Swenson yelled. The new enforcers tried to obey, but as soon as they trod on the pool of fluid covering the floor, it rose up and grasped their boots, and they too began to stick fast. "Find another way! Bring him to me!" Jed heard Swenson shouting as he haired down the corridor. He ran past rich wall hangings and pieces of art, darted looks through wooden doorways to see people rising from behind ornate desks to investigate the commotion, all the time his feet pounding noiselessly on the thick carpet. Then ahead, spilling out of a lift, came more enforcers. Ignoring the sign saying "Director" on the front, Jed grabbed the nearest office door and wrenched it open, only to find another door just inside. He shoved that one open, this time pushing it away from him. "Hey!" exclaimed the balding, puffy-faced man inside. "You can't come in here, I closed the oak." He stood up, heading for Jed, who was closing the doors behind him. "Stay back," Jed warned the man. The director grinned. "Well, what?" he said, still advancing as he adjusted his red braces. Jed flicked some mucus from his hand onto the man's cheek. The director reeled. "Ah! What in tower?" "Lock these doors," Jed commanded. I can't," the director whined, clearly wanting to touch his stinging cheek and not daring to. "There's no lock. When the outer door is shut, no one's supposed to come in. That's how it works." Jed looked round wildly. As he did so, the man made a lunge for the doors. Jed could have caught him. But did he really want to see someone else die from the mucus? He let him go, hear him screaming for help out in the corridor. Then he saw it. Through the unmirrored windows was a balcony, Anger rose in Jed again. They knew about outside, and they knew the tower had balconies. He went to the windows, his slimy fingers slipping on the catch. Just wait until he told Clarice. The enforcers burst into the room just as Jed slid open the patio door. Jed didn't have time to think of a plan, so dived onto the balcony, scrambled up on the handrail, and then up again onto the guttering. Ahead of him was a vast expanse of gently sloping glass roof, forming part of a huge pyramid that was the very top of the tower. Jed hadn't realised the boardroom and executive suites formed the penthouse. He didn't wait. He scrambled and slid towards the small mast at the top of the pyramid. A crashing noise made him look round, and he wasn't surprised to see enforcers swarming after him. Jed continued to climb. As he drew nearer to the mast, he realised there was a lamp on the very top. It blinked weakly, a red light rotating around inside a glass cover. Jed reached the mast and clung on, the wind buffeting him now he was out of the lee of the roof. From his vantage point, he could see that enforcers were climbing up all four sides of the roof, some of them struggling in their flapping white gowns as the wind whipped them. Jed racked his brains, trying to think. What should he do now? He couldn't climb any higher. He looked at the mast. Could he use it as a weapon? No. It looked too securely fastened and was too big for him, even if he did manage to loosen it somehow. Then he saw a small yellow sign hidden round the back. It was instructions on how to replace the red bulb at the top. That's when an image suddenly popped into his head of a technical line drawing of the very top of the tower. It was all black lines and neat handwritten script. Service hatch, read the label. Jed looked round his feet, found what he was looking for. Thank you, Michael, he breathed, as with one hand still clutching the mast, he wrenched open a panel in the sloping side. With the enforcers closing in, he ducked through the opening, finding himself on a tight spiral stair in a huge roof space. Below him, strange swirling shapes arched gracefully up and over, tying together 4 huge knuckles of bone. Jed realised he was above the main columns holding up the tower. Dashing down the staircase, he looked for a way out. Scattered between the bone structures were huge units with fans whirling in their sides, while in the dark recesses he could hear lift machinery whining as it stopped and started. Then he saw it. Light flooded through an opening. Jed made for it, only to stop in his tracks on a metal walkway over a knuckle. Enforcers were clambering up through this gap. He whirled round to see more enforcers, this time coming down the spiral stair he'd just descended. Oh, come on, Jed cursed, frustrated at being trapped. He tried to remember the drawing again, but the pounding of the pursuing feet was spoiling his concentration. He prayed there was a way out, but as he forced himself to think of the drawing, he could see there wasn't. There was only one thing to do. He vaulted the metal handrail. He'd land on the bone and try to lose them in the maze of structures that grew around the knuckle. Jed braced himself for the landing, ready to roll out the way as he hit the hard surface. But as he impacted, his feet didn't jar as he'd expected, but crashed straight through the bone. He opened his mouth to yell in surprise, but it filled with bone dust, nearly choking him. And in suffocating blackness, Jed fell. Thank you very much for listening to The Rainbow Tower. To see more of R H Stewart's excellent artwork, you'll find him on Instagram at roy.hootson.stewart. For Alex Tymms, why not try the novel OutCaste at ao3.com? Or, for something completely different, check out the Amier series on YouTube or at amier.com, also by Alex Tymms. The Rainbow Tower. Text copyright Alex Tymms. Illustrations copyright R H Stewart. The right of Alex Tymms and R H Stewart to be identified as the author and illustrator of this work has been asserted in accordance with the Copyright Designs and Patents Act 1988.